folks, welcome to Trickle Down Philosophy, where I look at all different kinds of ideas in the world of science, whether theological. I like looking at all these different metaphysical claims and such, and just analyzing them to see if they make sense or not. And there are limits to what we humans can know. There are limits on what we should assert as being absolute. And I do not believe in absolute certainty, but in Sir Karl Popper's world, reliability plays a big part in how we live out our lives. So I take a look at various arguments being made. It doesn't matter to me what the arguments are. Some are stupider than others. Some seem to make more sense or well thought out. The person making the argument is a bit congenial and open-minded, and I like that too. But we're going to look at, I saw this when YouTube recommended it to me, based on my search history. An anthropologist debunks Darwin's most abused idea. Now, I don't know what this is. I react to these by and large. I don't pre-watch them. I like just seeing what the arguments are and share my thoughts in the moment. I'm more of a philosopher. I'm agnostic when it comes to my theology, if you will. There might be a God who's paying attention. I have a lot of different ideas as to why that doesn't make sense to me, especially the paying attention part. But as far as a matter of logic or rational ideas go, the universe, all the matter in the universe may have had a beginning. That's equally plausible as no, it didn't. So James Suzman, what is Darwin's most abused idea?
In many ways, humans are kind of evolutionary freaks. We're much more capable of learning skills than, let's say, our Australopithecus ancestors a few million years ago were. When I was 19, I bizarrely ended up getting an internship at a merchant bank. And in that bank, we had a manager. And he would pepper his talks with us with this kind of Darwinian language. Banking is a survival of the fittest. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. Life is a continuous process of competition. The truth is, evolutionary history just isn't a constant competition. Actually, most animals spend as much time as they can relaxing, taking it easy, or playing and enjoying themselves. This idea that everything is continuously battling for energy is nonsense. I spent most of the last 25 years documenting hunter-gatherers as they took their worldview and tried to engage with our worldview in very uneven terms, and to try and make sense of their perceptions of work and our perceptions of work. And what it did was it revealed an entirely different way of thinking, an entirely different way of being. My name's James Suzman. I'm an anthropologist, and the title of my latest book is called Work, A Deep History.
Okay, I'm going to pause for a second, though, and say, if the universe is composed of fractals, where take larger things and like a tree, and then when you look at a branch of a tree, come in on it, it looks remarkably like the tree. Its structure looks remarkably like the tree with offshoots and other parts. Then you come in at a leaf and you look at the veins within it, and it too looks remarkably like a tree. And then you come in closer and it continues this way. Or if you take an image of the universe, maybe time lapse of over, an hour, whatever it may be, and you see this in a very favorable area, let's say out in the middle of the ocean or in a desert where you can see the sky, and you overlay that over a human brain, the neurons in a human brain, they look remarkably similar. So fractalization is the idea that like the smaller elements resemble the whole, the big thing. And in terms of anthropology, where he said in the beginning, humans today don't resemble earlier humans, tens of thousands of years ago, maybe just thousands. I don't know what his reference frame is here. But the evolution of ideas may follow the same pattern where our ideas may not lead to survival. 99% or so of species, according to Hitchens in a prior video and others that I've done, about 99% of species that ever existed have gone extinct or presumably will go extinct. I don't know how that's going to work. Maybe that number will increase. But in the context of consistency, which in a sense is what fractalization is, partly, not entirely, but do our ideas that we continually come up with, our new ideas and explanations and so forth, are they going to lead to our extinction? I mean, certainly the development of the nuclear bomb might attest to that, but that aside, let's see where he goes between peoples, some of whom are in more civilized societies, however you want to define that. I don't think there is any such thing. I think there are just societies.
From the Stone Age to the age of robots.
This stuff's fascinating to me.
When one thinks about hunter-gatherer society, they have imagined a world in which we endured this horrendous struggle for survival in an eat-or-be-eaten world. Nature was red in tooth and claw, and life was hard, and we learned to accumulate and grab resources. It was a great competition for life. But it seems fairly clear we enjoyed quite a lot of leisure time as hunter-gatherers. 20 years ago, I went off to the Kalahari to start working with a group of people called the Jinwasi. The Jinwasi were first hunter-gatherer society that were really studied to see how hard they actually worked, and it was revealed that they worked 15 hours in a week and had a very different work ethos to what we do here in the West. The idea of what constitutes work and the way we organize our lives can be very different and very contextual basis. Hunting, gathering, fishing, hiking. In the Jinwa world, those are all considered work. In the Western world, where I come from at the moment, most of those things are considered leisure activities now. The Inuit and the Arctic, the Aboriginals in Australia, and there, of course, people like the Jinwasi engage with the land with consummate skill and consummate, in some ways, ease. The Kalahari Desert, where the Jinwasi live, is an incredibly tough environment. It's the kind of place where most of us, if we were dumped there without any prior knowledge of how to do things, we would be dead within several days. The Jinwasi, on the other hand, are able somehow out of this seemingly desolate place to pluck out 130 or so different plant species. They're able to hunt 15 or 20 animal species. They are so skilled and so attuned to that environment that they are able to do so on the basis of really a marginal amount of effort. Even in the toughest times of year, you're looking at not spending more than 4 or 5 hours a day on the food quest. And you're looking at the best times of year, people are able to simply pluck things. It's almost a bit like a magical kind of 7-Eleven. Now, of course, it sounds a little bit idyllic, and hunter-gatherers went through intensely difficult times, periods of climatic change, but for the most part, living off the land seemed a very straightforward way of making a living, and we are supremely adapted to making a living as hunters and gatherers. Hunter-gatherer societies, they're typically highly egalitarian. Richard Lee, an anthropologist who worked with the Jinwasi, he used the word fiercely egalitarian, and I haven't found a better way to describe it. There are no hierarchies whatsoever. Age does not convey any authority to anybody. Gender does not convey any authority to anybody. It's incredibly open and tolerant. People don't force things on children. But they also realize that there's an instinct, in particular, they say, not among women, but among men. Young men who go out hunting and they bring in their first big animal, they'll strut in and show off. They'll say that potentially risks upsetting the egalitarian balance that makes the society function. Rather than praise a successful hunter, they mock them. Somebody shows up if they've killed a giraffe, which is something huge and it's enough to feed everybody for ages and the meat's drying from the branches. They'll say, this giraffe, this bit of a scrawny giraffe and it stinks a little bit. And there's this great ritual of humility and insult that goes on. And the hunter will be expected to behave with great humility. And the way it was described by one man, he said, we use it to gentle young men's hearts.
Yeah, it's... that's the effect of it, but it's like trash talking among sports teams. And when I played sports and stuff too, there would be a certain amount of trash talking that went on.
To enable leadership to be based purely on context and competence, voluntarily given and voluntarily accepted.
But I did a work a number of years ago in which I wanted to come up with a list of 100 things that would not exist in a perfect world. And I wound up coming up over time with over 1,500 things that by and large lead to death. and, like bus fumes. But there are a lot of things like, let's say, a podiatrist. Well, you wouldn't need a doctor in a perfect world. You would just be healthy. You wouldn't need to fix things like that. There wouldn't be sadness. There wouldn't be sorrow. There wouldn't be comparative religion classes. Not because there wouldn't be religion, but you wouldn't be comparing it. There probably wouldn't be religion either. But one of the basic premises that I used in my mind is that you wouldn't possess things. Like if somebody else needed something, you would just offer it to them. They could just have it. Now, in today's quote-unquote civil society, New York, the UK, Australia, wherever he went to work for a bank, what's mine is mine. Don't take a slice of my pie, as Pink Floyd's song Money says. And, keep your hands off of my stack. But in an ideal world, and it seems like this is one of their world, the world that he's depicting is like, well, if you need something, I'll give it to you. Or you could just demand it and I'll give it to you. Now, you might say in that scenario, well, what if you really have an egotistical, selfish prick living among you, a jerk, who just goes around to everybody and says, gimme, gimme, gimme? What's the answer to that? Well, the other people would say, go to him after he has all this stuff, give me the stuff. Well, I want that rice. I want that piece of clothing. And then he would be stripped of everything he had if he abided by the rules. I don't know how they enforce rules of people who get out of control. What are the punishment? What are the social implications of keeping the order within the society like this? He could probably tell us how they handle that. Maybe he will. But I do like the premise of shared resources. I just do. It's a beautiful, beautiful, heartfelt, practical system, and it really does bespeak cooperation among folks.
Resources were shared openly and evenly and done through a system of demand sharing. In the system of demand sharing, it is in the right of pretty much anybody to go and ask anybody else for a share of what they have. And it is considered extremely rude to turn that person down under any circumstances. It stops any kind of authority. This enabled food and resources to flow very evenly and very quickly through society. The truth is now, very few zoologists, in fact no zoologist or ecologist, will think of an ecosystem as governed by competition. Instead, it will be governed by webs of intricate engagements, some of which are cooperative, some of which are less. This idea that nature is a constant competition for life is nonsense. Hunter-gatherers like the Zhonghuasi describe their environment as a kind of continuous flow of give and take between species and interactions. There's absolutely no denying that the extraordinary attitudes that evolved during the hunter-gatherer era have now brought us incredible benefits. We are both incredibly adaptable and culturally intransigent. When change is forced upon us, we're really good at adapting to it. We're amazingly good at doing it, but only when we have no choice. And I think what we might see is a restructuring and reorganization of our societies. Identities now, which are far more hybridized. We certainly have a work identity through our Zoom channel. But for many people, I think there'll be an opportunity to re-engage themselves in the physical space that they are in. And I think it's going to profoundly reorganize the way we think about community, identity, belonging, and self. Economists say we're all universally this kind of selfish beast. Anthropologists, on the other hand, take the very starting point of their experience is based on generally going out and living somewhere where all your most fundamental and basic ideas about how the world works are often turned on their heads. It's a fundamental transition. It upsets your sense of the world. Then anthropologists, I think, are based on having this double perspective of being in one world and from another, and then being able to look back in the world that they're from. And frankly, I think it would be good if we still lived in a world where people could experience another way of living and being to the point that it makes the strange familiar and the familiar strange.
I like that a lot. It does. And that's where various perspectives are a good thing. This is within cultural and anthropological studies, if you will, just looking to see how other cultures live and see the practical the benefits of it. I mean, the rat race, when we look at, even people like, let's say in the UK, look at how Americans work, and we get maybe a week or two off each year. They have it standard to have 6 weeks off each year. And they say Americans work too hard. And that goes back to what he said in the beginning, where we've looked at like the getting of food as sort of like a luxury. It's not our work. There it's work. It's survival, for the hunter-gatherers, as implied in their name. Now it's like our work is go to work in a bank, and that's survival of the fittest. And he says, well, that's an abused idea. And I like the way he put that it's abused because it isn't really survival of the fittest. It's a dog-eat-dog world. He says actually the better way of living, or another way of living, is through this cooperation among one another. It isn't work 100 hours a week like they do at Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and the investment banks. And back in the day, I'm sure Drexel and Salomon and folks like that, where you work 100 plus hours a week. Here they work, he said, like 15 hours a week. And the first time somebody goes and catches, makes his first big kill for the community and everybody gets to eat for a time, they make fun of the person instead of like, bravo, 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 making him feel good, self-esteem. It's like, no, now you're part of the community in a different sense. You've grown to being somebody who can provide for the community, and we love that about you, but don't get your head in the clouds here. This is all about everybody. You're a part of it, just as we are. You're as much a part of it, but no more a part of it than we are, even though this is a moment where you're bringing home, he said, maybe a giraffe or whatever. So the survival of the fittest, who are the fit, those that survive, all that, he says, no, it's not competition that makes us this better place. It's not dominating other people or species or anything. It's cooperation. And that does go back anthropologically, and I've said this on other videos as well, that the thing that made mankind sort of the apex being on planet Earth is cooperation. We cooperated among ourselves. We're not the biggest species. Rhinos, hippos, lions, horses, they're way bigger than we are. Donkeys, donkeys are nasty beings. There's a reason farmers have them, and it's because they kill wolves. They stomp out anything that comes into their territory. They're nasty beings. They would stomp you out too if they saw you as an enemy, and they frequently do initially, for instance. So the idea that cooperation among us is what makes us a better people. It might even give us the luxury of only working 15 hours a week, the way he said, instead of 100 hours a week on Wall Street or in the UK or wherever, the Sand Hill Road boys out at the venture capitalist firms and whatnot, wherever. People work a lot in industrialized nations. And then we go to a grocery store and get our food. And that's just fun for us, basically. I got to pick up a few items. It's already there. So our work is different than what the hunter-gatherer's work is, and even in the world today. So I love the idea of cooperation. It isn't stomping out the other guy purposely. Natural selection actually kind of works under the surface if you believe in that. The concept of it is that, adaptations will be made. And he did use the word. We adapt in unpleasant circumstances. We're forced to, and we're amazingly adaptive. Natural selection itself kind of does that as well. It also drives most of its hosts into extinction. So it's this funky little thing. So, all right, folks, leave your thoughts on this. I like having more of a composite picture of the realms of understanding out there, and that's why I currently call the channel Trickle Down Philosophy. Everything is a philosophical inquiry to me, and maybe in actuality to everybody. It just involves thought, looking at how things may be, considering other people's lines of thinking, and then making your best guess as far as how things work, or being comfortable with your own limitations of understanding, or what we may call knowledge. All right, guys, have a great day. Please subscribe. I'll see you on another video, and keep thinking philosophically.